It's 7:30, so why don't we start and then we'll get going and then we'll see how much time we need tonight. All right, so next to the last class meeting on campus, believe it or not. Next week is obviously Thanksgiving, and hopefully everybody has lots of good plans for at least relaxing and maybe getting some good food. We are going to visit my parents who live in State College, Pennsylvania. And then we're wondering why we were having such a hard time finding a hotel. Didn't realize it's a home Penn State football game on the day that we're going there. So, yeah, but it is what it is. Third largest stadium in the world.
Wow.
Currently seats, the official capacity is something like 109,000.
You know what the biggest one is?
I don't. It's the second largest in the Western Hemisphere. So there must be one in somewhere in Europe that's bigger. And I can't remember what the other one is in the Western Hemisphere, but it's kind of major. So anyways, so no class next week. The week after, from the beginning of the course, has been a not on campus week. That is actually technically the last week of classes, but I swapped it with the week following, which is the final exam week, but we have no final exam, so we're just kind of switching those two out. Plus that, I figured that gives you an extra week, basically between now and then, to just finish projects up, because that's really, at this point, all we're about, is finishing up the TIPs, finishing up your Moodles, any other odds and ends that may still be hanging on from other work in the class, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So yeah, basically after tonight, the next time we meet is our final class. As I've said before, the main activity that night is just to have everybody do a brief, informal presentation about the TIP plans that you've developed. So you'll want to talk about what's the problem you are trying to address, a little bit about maybe your process, if there were any things you ran into along the way, what technology you ended up settling on, and just kind of the broad outlines of your integration plan, just as a way to kind of put a button on that project before those are completely wrapped up. So like I said, it's not a formal presentation. I don't really have parameters about the presentation other than you just sort of talk about your plan and talk a little bit about your process, and I'll just kind of share that with the class. So that'll be our final activity for that week. Tonight, the main thing is the beta testing, which hopefully is not a surprise to anybody, considering that I've tried to say it every week for several weeks and text it out and everything else. So there will have a little process we go through, and actually right now with even numbers, it almost works out a little better because it means that you'll be swapping with one other person, and that'll help to make things run a little smoother. And then the information that you get from tonight's beta test, you can then use over the next couple of weeks to either incorporate into your Moodle or not. You can feel free to ignore any advice or any suggestions that you get from anybody. You ultimately are the one in charge of your Moodle, but you may get some ideas of some things you want to redo or restructure or whatever out of tonight's discussions. So that is basically the overview of what's left. Just to follow up briefly about last week and the TIPs, is to remember that I gave a sort of an overview document that gives you a bit of a template in terms, forgot I had done that. That gives you a bit of a template as to what your actual final document should be. Anything that's in bold should be in your final document in terms of headers for each section. And then the content for each section, I have a description here. But again, that should largely be coming from the other 4 phases that you've completed or should have completed by this point, with maybe just some reworking of some language or things like that. Pretend that the audience for these is a board of education or a district administration of some kind. So it should be written in that voice. It should be somewhat formal language. that would be presented to a group that is in charge of a district or in charge of their technology planning. So that'll maybe help to unify also the language. But basically, the 6 sections, the description of the school where it's happening and the demographics, what your objectives are. That's the needs statement. What technology you're proposing, how you plan on bringing everybody up to speed on using that technology, and then your overall timeline and steps for the overall project, not just the student the professional training, but also the implementing of the plan and so on. And then, as best as you can, budget sorts of ideas. That is probably going to be the section that you maybe have the least amount of hard information on, because you may not know exactly how much it would cost to hire X number of people for X number of days, or what does professional development cost a district, or things like that. But if you have any numbers, maybe specifically related to the hardware, if you know it costs X amount of dollars for a license, or that this machine is going to cost this much money, throw that in there as well. And then the first page is just an overview again of the rubric and the things that are supposed to be there and the formatting and so on. So just since the next time I see you guys, that project will be done. Just wanted to point that out as well back on week 13, that document is there to be used as a framework for your final document. So any questions about TIP at this point? Because I don't really plan on talking about it anymore. Good? Okay. So beta testing, in terms of what we're going to do tonight, there's a couple of things that I'm going to ask you guys to do right now in your Moodles, just to get them taken care of. One of them should be there already, but you might want to change the name of it. The other thing will just take a few minutes, and I just haven't addressed it specifically. So one of the things that I would like to have right at the top of your Moodle, and I know this is not what would be there if this was the actual Moodle your students were using, but just to have a page that's got your instructional design work on it. These are already done. This comes from 2 forums that we did way back in like week 2 and week 3 of the course. So all I'm going to ask you to do is on your Moodle to create a page up in that top section. And then if you want, I gave links here in our class Moodle that'll take you back to those 2 forums. And if you just want to open up the post that you did, and you can literally just copy and paste the content from those posts. They were meant to be sort of 2 halves of a whole, so the numbering even continues on from the second part. So just take a few minutes right now and just grab those 2 write-ups from those 2 posts and just paste them into a page on your Moodle. That will help me also when I'm doing the final evaluation, so that I don't have to go somewhere else to look up what your instructional design plan was. It'll be right there. So take a couple minutes to do that. And the other thing, I had asked everybody to put a forum at the top of their Moodles for feedback. And I have a couple of times provided feedback in those forums. If the naming of that forum, some people still sort of had a generically named forum up there. You might want to just rename that forum as for feedback or something like that, because the people who are beta testing tonight are also going to use that forum to give some written responses to you. So I just want it to be clear at the top, especially maybe if you have multiple forums, which one should be used for Moodle feedback. So just park those 2 things, or make sure that those 2 things are at the top of your Moodle. And I'll give you a few minutes to do that, and then I'll talk about the actual flow of the evening. Oh. Oh, yeah, I've done that a number of times where you have the title of the page and then there's the description and then there's the content of the page. And I'll get everything all formatted, then realize, it's the wrong place.
So I just realized I failed to do. I had switched my topic, that my content,
Right.
and I didn't go back and I didn't change it in.
Okay.
So everything
Well,
I'm looking, like, for instance, like sections, like pre-train, those are the same. So it'd just be like segmentation. It's like my unit
mhm.
itself, so that wouldn't take me long. So I just maybe
Okay.
like three
Well,
things. So should I just upload it for now?
throw it in there right now as it is, and then just to make a note to yourself that over the next couple of weeks, just go in and make any adjustments to that. Yeah, you don't have to go back and change the original post, but so start with what you have there, and then
how should I make like a page and then
Yeah.
add the links?
not necessarily the links. You can just copy and paste the text.
Oh, the
Just
whole text.
yeah, just put the text itself right on the page so that I can just open it up and see see it all there.
Page and copy and paste it all on that
Yep.
page.
Yep.
And the page that we're putting is just in our course, right? Not in like our whole Moodle site, I guess, but in that particular course.
In that course, yeah, just up at the top in that, like in the case of our class, up in this, there's always this top header section where you can put things that are sort of pinned at the top. So just put the page up there and paste those two pieces of the plan. Do you want to build a snowman? Of course, my daughter was at the perfect age to be obsessed with the first Frozen.
Pretty good movie.
It is. I was impressed with it. It's weeks. I think it was weeks 2 and 3. There's in this week's week, I put a link. So if you're down in week 13, there I did put 2 links there that should take you right to the 2 posts. And if you happen to discover at this time that you didn't do one of those 2 parts, then maybe make a note of that. And no. All right, so it sounds like the frantic clicking and so on has subsided somewhat. All right, so in terms of the beta test, I'll keep an eye on the time tonight in terms of how long. My guess is that probably each round of beta testing is going to take somewhere around 25 minutes or so, 30 minutes. So I'd like to do at least 2 rounds, and we'll see where we are at that point in terms of time and whether people think it will be useful to get even a third opinion or not. But basically, the cycle is going to be this, that you should already have your Moodle up. We're not going to go through the process of trying to add somebody else as a student. So you're going to actually switch locations with whoever you're trading with because they'll already be logged in and already have their Moodle on the screen. But what you would do is, and actually you can do this before somebody looks at yours if you want, is to go in and to change the role. Remember, for you guys, that's going to be in the top right-hand corner. And just switch the role to student so that then the person sitting down can essentially experience your Moodle as a student would. So that'll make certain things visible and other things not. And also will keep somebody from accidentally changing something on your Moodle without you wanting them to. So you'll swap out, I'll give 10 minutes or so for you just to explore the other person's Moodle. That may be enough time to kind of get through everything in the person's Moodle. It may not. So especially if there's a lot of video content or things like that, you might have to do a little bit of skimming just to try to kind of take a look at everything. But the key points to look at would be things like just the physical organization. Can you as a student understand like what it is you're looking at and know where you're supposed to go and know what's supposed to be clicked on? The assessment piece, if it's there, it would be good to try going through the assessment piece just to see if that's functioning. And again, if you kind of understand it. The main thing is this is meant to be helpful to the person whose Moodle it is. So you want to kind of try to stress test it a bit and come at it with these fresh eyes and try to figure out anything that you could suggest as improvements. You may absolutely, obviously, give feedback that is positive, and that's always a nice way to start. But recognize that the main point of this is to try to help the person make any adjustments to their Moodle that are going to help really kind of put the polish on it. So we'll spend about 10-ish minutes or so exploring the other person's Moodle. Then I'll give you a few minutes in written form on the forum at the top of that Moodle to do a post so you can sort of summarize your comments. But then I'm also going to, after that, allow the two people to come together and to debrief each other in person. So the things that you write maybe should be more along the lines of sort of some notes or some things to think about so that the person later on can go back to that and get some reminders of what you talked about. But then in person, you can maybe point things out or talk in a little bit more depth about your experience. And then obviously you would, one person can debrief the other and then you can switch roles since the two of you will be sharing each other's Moodles. So, and then once we get through that, we'll just swap around and do it again. And then we'll kind of see where things are and how people feel about the feedback they've gotten. And we'll kind of adjust from there. All right. So on your screens, what you should do is be in your Moodle, switch it to the student role so that they're looking at it as a student, and pick somebody in the class that you'd like to switch out with. And I'll kind of keep track of time just so that things don't get away from us too much, but so I'll keep track of roughly about 10 minutes or so. So take your time, kind of look through as much as you can. Everybody's going with the easy swaps to start with.
Yeah, right. I was just reading my feedback from him.
Yeah, I still have
last
some
week
more
he was
to
like,
do.
oh,
So for instance,
Oh,
the one that is
I got the
most,
same.
that's complete, like I polished up completely, is